Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be under your chairship, and may I start by wishing you a very happy Valentine's Day for Saturday. As we know, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And while that is probably the most famous line in British literature, the fact is, when it comes to British policy, the role of relationships seems too often to be an afterthought. And yet, they are the building block of a healthy society. I'm the first to jump on our cultural obsession with relationships with a new Bridgerton season, but it's time that relationships become a political obsession too. Valentine's Day is a moment each year when the country reflects on love, partnership and the relationships that underpin our families, communities and society, with public interest high concerning the pressures facing modern couples and a growing body of evidence that respect, trust and equality prevent relationship breakdown. Today this debate offers us a timely opportunity to consider the factors that enable healthy partnerships in Britain today. Healthy relationships are fundamental to a number of key policy domains. In health, strong and stable partnerships are associated with improved mental well-being, reduced loneliness and better overall health outcomes, while relationship distress is linked to increased demand on NHS and social care services. In education and children's services, the quality of parental relationships strongly influences children's emotional development, attainment and long-term life chances. In the economy, relationship stability and equality affect workforce participation, financial security and the capacity of families to balance work and care. And in efforts to tackle violence against women and girls, healthy norms, cultures and values are clearly fundamental. Policy decisions across these and other areas can also have a significant impact on couples' abilities to build and sustain equal, healthy relationships. Workplace policies, such as parental leave and access to flexible working, shape how families organise care and employment. Housing affordability and security influence relationship formation and stability. Mental health provision, early years support and the wider social safety net all play a role in reducing pressures that constrain partnerships, while legal and justice frameworks affect how society responds to abuse, coercive control and family breakdown. The fact is that relationships today look entirely different from just 20 years ago. Today, over 2/3 of families with dependent children have both parents in employment, meaning the majority of households are dual income. And with divorce well entrenched in our culture, 1 in 4 families with dependent children is a single-parent household. There are huge benefits to more people working, especially with women, and it's a good thing that people have access to divorce when relationships are not healthy. But we can't just take the benefits of these improvements without mitigating the impacts too. What happens to child development when both parents are working full-time, or when a single parent has no capacity outside of work and childcare? What happens to our ability to bond with each other as a couple if we are in a romantic relationship? What happens to our capacity to engage in and contribute to our local communities? These shifts in the roles of couples and households also have negative impacts on relationships that we could have but have yet struggled to mitigate. This government is rightly focused on growth as the key way this country can get back to a time of prosperity. But most parents I know, and bear in mind parents make up a huge part of the working population, most parents I know are exhausted. And if there's one thing I know as a parent of small children is nothing good or productive comes of being exhausted. So how can we expect great output and productivity from people in the workplace when the strain on couples is so high? We have to pay closer attention to how households are coping. And challenges in relationships not only impacts what we produce in the workplace, but also how we sustain our population. Our own Secretary of State for Education has recently highlighted our falling birth rate and has rightly highlighted actions taken by this government to try and change that, such as better funded childcare and the cost of living and housing. But couples are operating under unprecedented strain to both parent or care and work full time, and yet we are barely talking about that psychological toll. And then we are surprised that domestic violence rates increase, mental health in both men and women is plummeting and adding to our welfare bill, that send issues are skyrocketing and that couples decide one child is enough. As a government, we give couples screen time advice and encourage them to have more children, but we rarely ask what is life like for you right now and what would make your life easier to be a couple and a parent in 2026. Let's do that more. When it comes to domestic violence, government has made huge strides in developing a comprehensive strategy to combat violence against women and girls, but the fact remains that 3.8 million people experienced domestic abuse last year, and 1/4 of all UK residents have experienced domestic abuse since the age of 16. And the place that abuse really starts in earnest is pregnancy in the first 1,001 days of life. 30% of domestic abuse begins in pregnancy, rising to 40% in the first 1,001 days, precisely when infant brain development is most sensitive to stress and trauma. And yet, terrifyingly, only 0.5% of maternity patients disclose abuse, so those numbers miss the majority of cases. Abuse during this period worsens maternal mental health, increases adverse birth outcomes, and damages infants' socio-emotional development, effects that shift costs onto the NHS, social care, education, and the justice system for years. For the relationships between parents and children, which in turn leads to stronger, more secure relationships and behaviour from those children as they grow up too, we know that only 55% of infants currently develop secure attachments, and we know that insecure attachment is a key driver of poor outcomes later in life. Research this month from the Centre for Mental Health and the Parent-Infant Foundation has found that expanding access to parent-infant relationship teams to support parents in the most deprived areas to bond with their babies could save the government $1.2 billion annually. The single most significant thing we could do in this Parliament to start to change all this, Madam Chair, would be to introduce much better paternity leave, ideally at least 6 weeks paid and 90% of pay. Paternity leave in this country is truly embarrassing, and the fact is that 2 weeks isn't enough. The UK offer of 2 weeks of unpaid statutory paternity leave is among the least generous in Europe, constraining fathers' early involvement and entrenching relationship inequality. Joseph Rowntree Foundation modelling finds that 6 weeks at 90% of pay could deliver $2.68 billion to the wider economy, primarily through increased maternal employment and more equal sharing of care. 59% of people agreed that bad paternity leave made it difficult to share childcare responsibilities equally, not just over the short term, but the long term too, with patterns proving harder to shift. And actually, an even more critical point, that it's not just men and women, but it's children who'll benefit from this too. 10 to men found that a loving paternal relationship was the single biggest factor from boyhood that does the most to prevent a boy becoming a man who abuses his partner. The macro win of all of this is higher labour supply and reduced gender gaps. The fiscal win is higher tax receipts and lower benefit dependency. And the household win is healthier relationships and more resilient income. Imagine the benefits if dad or partner could build a bond and confidence with baby, so that understanding is deepened between parents, bonds are built to strengthen that determination to care for baby, and a society is developed where protecting your family bubble becomes the pride point. Madam Chair, I'll be frank, I truly hope this Labour government, the most progressive and gender-balanced parliament ever, will catch us right up and commit to 6 weeks of protected paternity leave at 90% of pay, paid for by government, and do it soon. If we don't tackle the single biggest step we can to move closer to equality, then I don't know what we're here for. One of the facts that radicalised me more than any other, that tells me we are still so early on in the journey to equal and healthy relationships, is the fact that before 1991, it was still legal to rape your wife. That means that anyone who got married before 1991 did so knowing that fact. We are only 35 years into a world that expects men and women to be equal in a marriage. I would suggest we're only beginning to work out what that means for us as a society. One of the biggest hills we have to climb now is to help men and boys to find newly empowered roles in equal relationships, in the same way women and girls have been doing. I know many colleagues in this place are doing important work on building role models and positive education for boys. And the government's own Vogue strategy includes teacher training to spot the early signs of misogyny in boys. I truly welcome the plans for improved relationships education in schools that this government is introducing this year, particularly the plans to start this earlier in primary schools and the focus on how to develop healthy relationships. But I do think we need to remain live to how early we subconsciously introduce power disparities. And because role models are critical, as part of preparing for this debate, our friends at the Dad Shift challenged us to share couples we admire for their equality. And you know, the couple I think I admire most for their equality is Tom and Barbara Good from The Good Life. Amazingly, I only discovered the 1970s show recently, and I was slightly taken aback by how good they are to each other in a way that it feels we sometimes regress from these days. So it's always been possible to have healthy relationships. Actually, one of the things that I really value is the value of debate, and I think actually the fact that in our new schools framework we're introducing oracy, to that ability to debate and discuss well, is really important. So it's always been possible, Madam Chair, to have these healthy relationships. We've just got to create the right social and policy decisions to make it easier. At this point, I want to give a quick shout out to the incredible role models I see talking to women and men about building positive, healthy relationships. Naya Roosh, Libby Ward, Jolie Brayley and Ashley James and so many others are all relentless at making sure we talk about what healthy relationships look like. And I know there are similar strong role models for men out there too. However, we've still got a long way to go. Did you know, Madam Chair, that there are only 9 mentions of the term the mental load in Hansard? And yet, on Mum and Parenting Instagram, I think I see it every other word. And, Madam Chair, in my office we have 4 core aims, and one of them is to be useful. So I want to end by leaving everyone with the most useful tool I've come across to tackle the mental load and equality in creating more healthy relationships. In Eve Rodsky's book, Fair Play, she says every task has 3 parts: conception, planning and action. To get something done, you first have to notice that it needs to be done in the first place. You then have to work out and plan how you're going to do it, and then you have to actually do it. So it's great to see more couples starting to share actions around the home, but let's start to see more equal sharing of the noticing and planning too. And yes, that will likely involve realising how big the mental load actually is for some people. Madam Chair, to conclude, healthy relationships underpin our healthy progress as a society, and whether we want to admit it or not, government policy underpins healthy relationships. We're doing great things as a government with improved relationship education, a powerful VOG strategy, more flexibility built into our employment rights, a huge increase in Best Start Family Hubs investment and a strengthened court system. But we have to do more. 90% of dads say they want to be more present in family life and have a more equal relationship, but our current paternity leave offer, one of the worst in the world, blocks them right out of the gate. Stanford research published just this week found that allowing couples to work a day a week from home would increase the birth rate by 0.5, taking our current rate of 1.4 back up close to the replacement rate. And yet there are political voices saying we shouldn't work from home at all. I hope we put healthy relationships more front and centre of all we do here going forward. Our future depends on it. And again, I wish you a very happy Valentine's Day for Saturday.